All right. What I thought I would call this is what your dad's cartoons forgot to tell you, or what your dad's cartoons didn't tell you, or something like that. Because I'm noticing a trend in really angsty, sort of selfish bullshit sort of videos from people titled, so and so characters told it how it was, or told it how it was when no one else did, or like what your dad forgot to tell you, and so on. And they're just preaching the most villainous, selfish bullshit ever. It's the most selfish bullshit ever. And it's ridiculous. Like, none of these people deserve to be listened to at all, basically. You know, at all. Like, at all. Like, there's nothing they've done that is worth watching or listening to, especially not those videos. Self sacrifice for the greater good, for the good of your people, at least, is a worthy cause. And it gives purpose. The problem is that Zoomers have been born into a situation with so much despair that it's basically water to a fish. And like one of the latest examples is sort of like the just give up sort of and stop fighting for good things kind of approach to life. And it's like, no, you fight for life. You fight the despair with living fully. And I will accept that even despair is a phase of life on some level. But the goal is to get beyond it. It might be a necessary step to tell you, hey, look, you're going about things the wrong way. But it's a necessary step on the path that leads beyond it. So I'm not here to say you should not despair ever necessarily. It's a real emotion. It's a valid one at times. But it can be overblown a little bit, I guess, and so on. And, you should be thinking about what a world would look like that you would actually want to live in. And you should fight like hell for it. And it's totally acceptable to destroy your enemies in service to that goal. Now, some people might kind of be confused when I say that because I'm generally for the common, decent man and woman and child. But, I'm going to counter with some memes or art works of fiction and art of my own. YouTube Rorschach Justice. RORSASCH. Justice. That is a very that is relevant to today a lot kind of thing. It's kind of like the idea of a lot of junkies and on opioids and child porn users and pedophiles and stuff like that plaguing the world, and the death and the misery and the destruction and the sickness of it all, the disgusting sickness of it all, is real. And you should, in some ways, let rage fuel your courage to face those who are causing these problems. It is a very reactionary sort of rage, to be honest, and it is perfectly justified in the current moment at least. And it is a very sane and rational response to the evils of the world. The Never Ending Story is a children's novel and it's a movie where kids face the very end of the universe of all things that they know about. And also, one of the kids at least faces a basically demonic wolf um, that admits that killing people's dreams makes them easier to control. And the phrase that comes to mind is become ungovernable. V for Vendetta, and by the way, these memes are not necessarily, or these works of fiction and art speak to something. They're not one-to-one correlation entirely with the reality, so like I want to throw a pinch of salt in this before I carry on. Take it with a pinch of salt, but V for Vendetta, the dominoes fall, and V for Vendetta, speech. Do the speech one first, and then the dominoes fall. Or just watch the movie and keep in mind the speech and the dominoes falling sort of thing. But you can YouTube the videos, and it's like, okay, after you watch the movie and so on. There's a little trick at the end of the movie where some of the people who wear the V for Vendetta mask in the end reveal themselves to be the various people in the movie as characters who should really not exist in that situation. Like they're dead, story-wise. They're actually like killed off. And there's a certain statement about how things are in a predetermined dance playing out mechanically to an inevitable conclusion, and so on. And without getting too much into existentialism and sort of Cthulhu stuff with God, who I believe in wholeheartedly, that is the general lesson of history. In a sort of, if you want a good series to describe the Western world right now, Battlestar Galactica, the remake from the 2000s or something, is a good, honest work of art and fiction. And it has a tagline of all of this has happened and all of this will happen again. And there's a biblical phrase that this probably comes from called, and the biblical phrase is, this too shall pass. There's a non-permanence to all things under the sun. Even the seeming strongest of tyrannies and dysfunctional societies will pass as a phase back into something a little better, or a lot better. You know, I'm old enough to remember, like, one of the things I remember specifically is that the right wing, as it currently stands, has a huge ton of things that were just common sense back in the 90s and 2000s. Like, literally, the right wing is basically what everyone was like 90s and 2000s, 25 years ago, basically, or 35 years ago. Like, it's not that long ago that everything changed from about 2015 onwards, 10 years ago. You know, and that's within my personal living memory. So I remember what it was like before and how like strange and new and weird the current situation really is. If people think this life as it stands now is the best there is to offer, that's not a sign that you just need to buckle under and accept your fate. That's a sign you need to fight like hell to overthrow the people responsible for mismanaging society to the point that we've fallen this far. And to get rid of the people making so many problems for everyone, and so on. Like, it is someone's fault on some level. And punishing them for ruining things is a valid situation. Now, granted, there's a reason why I put the V for Vendetta speech into it too. And there's a certain thrust of the speech where it says if you need to find someone responsible for the problems, you need only look into a mirror. But that correlates also to V being everyone symbolically as well in the movie V for Vendetta. And it's literally just letter V, like Roman numeral V for 5. You know, these tales of collapse and revival are old. You know, the Roman collapse and evacuation of Britain and the rise of King Arthur through the Dark Ages is like yeah, dude, absolutely. You know, like it's like, yeah, that's exactly what we need, a King Arthur type, or a bunch of them for various parts of the world to reset the order from the chaos that emerged from the collapse of the old order and revitalize it in ways that the old attitudes and worldviews couldn't, using ancient wisdom and applying it to new situations. Because the point of it is technology might advance, but human nature remains relatively similar. It's not completely static. It might evolve over the centuries or millennia, hundreds or thousands of years. It might evolve a little bit, but it's reasonably similar and consistent through all of history. Evolution works really slowly, and that means that we can rely on the biological realities and the psychological realities and the societies and cultures and structures that emerged on some deep fundamental levels that technology alone cannot infiltrate whatsoever. And basically, the thing that you have to remember and why it's so important to fight like hell against the basically demons that ruin civilizations is because technically we've got like 10 to 18, 20% of the population that are looking to destroy the rest of humanity for their own profit and good. Like, they're predators on their fellow man. And that falls in line with the Pareto distribution, Pareto distribution, or the Pareto principle of like 20% do 80% of the whatever it is. And that could be positive things like performance in the economy or financially or jobs, or it could be negative things in terms of destroying civilization or mass murdering or something like that. It's a neutral thing, the Pareto distribution, but it's a very consistent situation and so on. 20% do 80% of whatever it is, good or bad, basically. So we have pedophiles at 3 to 5% of the population. We have sociopaths at 5% of the population. So that's like 10% of the population. Then we got psychopaths at 1 or 2% of the population. Then we have narcissists. And it's like, there's literally like up to a 1/5 of the population that we have to fight and guard against through our cultural norms and so on, and our civic and social civil societies and so on, just to get a handle on survival and well-being. Yeah, and when you recognize that fact, it's not like just give up kind of thing. It's like, oh no, we have to fight like hell. And we have to spread the word as much as possible. Because that 20% isn't going to disappear, but that 20% will always exist as long as people exist, and it will continue to prey upon other people. So civil society exists to prevent such things from being able to happen so easily. And it's like, okay, then we got to protect civil society on some level. But that's not like a leftist sort of like childlike sort of, I'll just make a big speech and everyone will clap and therefore that'll solve the problems. No, you need justice. And the reason why I said it's okay to destroy your enemies, and this is a Rorschach kind of quote, is good and evil exists and evil needs to be punished. And that's why one person's murder amongst millions matters. And another phrase of his is never compromise even in the face of Armageddon. So good is good no matter what. Even if it's not useful, it's good. And good is almost always useful anyways, so it's like you just go with what's good and you'll get what's useful in the end probably. It might not be guaranteed, but it's like you'll make something that benefits yourself and others more on some level, depending on how much you sacrifice for the good of others. And it's only because of other sacrifices that we can live well, and so on. And another thing is, I said it's okay to destroy your enemies, but in the context of Rorschach, he's a very harsh man. But he's talking about walking by junkies, talking about how they're doing heroin and looking up child porn in the movie Watchmen by Alan Moore, I think, or something like that. And V for Vendetta is by the same guy, Alan Moore, as well. And Rorschach is basically the kind of guy that says humans get taken in and arrested by the police, but dogs get put down in response to a child murderer and so on, kidnapper and murderer. And, child rape basically emerges the same thing. And the sanctity of the sanctity of childlike innocence is such that the thing that sparks the serious aspect of V for Vendetta's master plan to undermine the tyrants is that one of the policemen shoots a child and so on. So the innocence of childhood is the one thing that is so sacred to a functioning society that it's like you will genocide people to protect children's sanctity in earnest. And it will definitely be legitimate morally and defensible morally, and if it's necessary, then it just needs to be done, because children are the future, and protecting that future and protecting that smile is so important that your willingness to slaughter millions of people to protect the children is like a moral action. It's not immoral, because children are the future, period. And it's no surprise that V for Vendetta and Watchmen were made, like they were written in like 1980s, and the movies were made in 2000s, when we still had morals in society and so on. And the other thing Rorschach teaches us is that truth matters. And that there's always a trail to lead one to the evil cabals of magical sorcerers in their towers, plotting to control and dominate the kingdom or the world or whatever. And someone will spill the beans eventually, and it will lead to the downfall of the people playing with the forces of the immaterial world and so on. And people like George Orwell, who warned about 1984 stuff or the totalitarian socialism stuff, had a pessimistic worldview, and George Orwell was a socialist. So his book, 1984, doesn't posit a solution, because the solution is so obvious. It's to get angry. It's to do whatever you can in your power to oppose and call out and destroy the system. And this system, in reality's case, is the Epstein client network, is probably a global elite pedophile cabal of like Illuminati conspiracy theory actual proportions. And it's a parasite. The system, as it's called, the system, as a title basically, is basically a parasitic organism on the civic body that's killing the host of society, basically. And the leftists term the system, and the right-wing term about socialist tyranny, and the schizo term about pedophile elite cabals of Illuminati kind of levels of influence, and the oh god, I forget what the fourth aspect to that one is, but you get the point. There's a convergence in all of this that we're finding in real life, where it's like, oh my god, all of this is converging, and it's like, wow, who'd have thought that? It's all connected, you know. But it's kind of interesting. Oh, the autistics combing through the globalist sort of, you will own nothing, you will be happy, you will have no privacy, own nothing and be happy, live in the pod, eat the bugs, kind of thing. So it's like all four of those versions, the schizo, the autist, the left, the right, are finding out that they have a grain of truth in their conspiracy theories about one world government and like the type of government being socialist and like the elites conspiring against the masses and like society being controlled by the psychopaths. It's all coming together in one thing. And it's literally that bad. It's literally like all the conspiracy theories of how bad they are coming true in a certain sense. And it's like, okay, are you going to surrender to that? Really? Or are you going to fight it with your every dying breath until one of you perishes? Because the idea is you're going to perish either way if they keep power. So why not fight them in the hopes of killing them, basically? Or killing their power base so that they can no longer hurt you or others. And if you can't fight for the sake and protection of those you love, then maybe you can fight to avenge them. Or yourself even. To hurt those who've hurt you. And to let rage, primal fury, guide your will where you're cowering, crouching in fear beforehand because you can't drum up the courage to accept the facts of reality as it stands now, as horrible as they are, and you feel helpless. And that's what they want you to do. So don't give in, fight it. And let fury guide your will if necessary. I've got I made a joke earlier about how the John Wick 2 movie ending where he meets Winston and then Winston makes a phone call and everyone around suddenly stops acting normal and starts doing like walk out on on John Wick and Winston talking. And that's what it must feel like for the Epstein files to have been for the people who were going to publish the Epstein files, because they 180'd so hard publicly that everyone's like, what the hell just happened? You know what I mean? The common decent man has to be much more dangerous now than ever before. We're run by absolute maniacs, and the common man has to be more dangerous to them than they are to the common man. And the woman needs to be more alert than the shadowy elites, psychos, ruining and ruining society at the same time, to sniff them out. More cunning and so on to sniff them out than they are sneaky for the woman. And the men need to be more physically dangerous and organized and so on than the shadowy elites can manage, to overwhelm them with sheer force of numbers and moral legitimacy and so on. And Rorschach's justice is something that bites you when you've seen the true face of evil, basically. And it's like, once that nibbles on you, you can't let it go. You have to pursue it as much as possible down the rabbit hole to through the fullness of despair in the moment at how far they've gotten in control of society. But their control is illusory or an illusion because power resides in the people when they get motivated and organized. And, it doesn't always happen necessarily, but, you know, there are times when people can do that. And, man, does it ever make waves when you find you're strong and you act on it. Like this is some Lord of the Rings, the last march of the Ents on to Isengard, because the hobbits showed them all their friends and family cut down by the orcs of Isengard, and like they just went ballistic. It's like that level of sort of situation. Situation. And like one of the things is that's going to force them to rely on the military. But the thing is, if the military do too much that's untoward against a large enough group of people, then all of a sudden, you know, the military looks horrendous. And in Ukraine, a taste of what happens when enough people converge on a single point of interest is that the military and the police and so on, when they find out the legitimacy is not in the hands of their leaders to the point that everyone knows it and no one's going to accept that they have legitimacy, they will physically bow before you even while they've got all of the guns. As shown in Ukraine during the 2014 Euromaidan riots and so on. Euromaidan or Euromaidan. And that's the enforcers of the current establishment doing that back then in Ukraine. So don't let these nihilistic, selfish twats tell you that they're giving good life wisdom and so on. They're full of shit. Let hatred guide your burning contempt for abusers of children. Let hatred guide you in your contempt for abusers of children. If for nothing else, protect the children, avenge the children, let anger flow through you. Don't just try and arrest it, stop it, not feel it. Let it be truly felt. And then channel it. And you don't need generic courage without anger. There's a Rome Total War or Medieval 2 Total War phrase that anger will do where courage lacks, as if anger leads to a form of courage just fine. And you should channel that anger more often in those domains or over those situations on those topics. And anyone who is trying to quote unquote understand or minimize child predators, responsibility and need to be held accountable. And that might mean executions by the country for treason or child abuse of various sorts. The severe ones like sexual abuse for children. Um, that might be needed to be done to break free from the despair they're trying to put you into the pit of. And if they don't respect children's well-being, what makes you think they're going to respect your well-being as an adult? Abusers love children the way a cat loves mice. And they love you as an adult the way a dog loves squirrels, where they'll chase them, and if they ever catch them, they'll tear them apart. If they're willing to do it to children, they're willing to do it to you. And that's the thing about them. They're all willing to do it to children. They're awful people. Like, oh, you're going to send a child home to their home country? Okay. That's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is rape and murder of children. It's real, and it's happening systematically on purpose, and the people doing it have names and addresses. They have a digital footprint. You can find out who they are eventually if enough people start investigating them seriously, privately, and independently, and so on, and sharing their knowledge with others, and so on. It's not just politicians, they're supporters too, in some senses. And just remember, all those dysfunctional people, the narcissists, psychopaths, sociopaths, and pedophiles, they all want power. And they're perfectly willing to lord it over you so that they can escape accountability for their antisocial, evil, wicked, sinful, unjust ways. They're going to use it as much as possible to avoid accountability for it. And accountability might be up to being hung from the gallows. Like, seriously. And the thing is, they only get away with it, and their machinations to kill off society and, like, literally kill the vulnerable and so on, or turn a blind eye to foreigners used as foot soldiers to the globalist regime, one world government regimes, because the native population doesn't hold them to account. And while that's really daunting to have so many enemies, socialists, globalists, third worlders, Islam, Africa, leftism, socialism, I think I said already, but I'll say it again, communism, and it's like, and the Epstein pedophile elite, Illuminati cabal, or whatever you want to call it. It's so daunting to have so many enemies, but when you realize that they're all very similar in their approach to life, in a certain meta sense, and you get to learn that it's all connected somehow in a very thematic or symbolic or theme or meme or life philosophy worldview kind of way in terms of how to treat other people, then suddenly it becomes a lot easier, because it's a lot easier to actually detect. And if you talk about how simple it is, then more people will detect it. And then suddenly, once the stealth is gone for them, they have no protection other than that. The only thing going for them is they have plausible deniability. And if you strip them of that and everyone knows what they're up to and everyone's talking about it, then these people will just disappear off the face of the earth. Basically, it'll be a purge of the wicked, a pedo purge or something like that. And I don't mean like you're gonna all have to do it yourself necessarily, but would you trust them to purge themselves? So it's like, okay, a drive towards justice is nothing without the threat of violence to back it up. Hence the term enforce. Enforce the law. Force the law onto people, force them to obey it, and so on. But first you gotta know what's right. And, the most basic thing I can suggest is the innocence of children, their life and virtue, because they are the future. And anyone that disrespects that is automatically suspect. Big time. Like, check their hard drives. And don't stop looking into them as much as possible, basically. You know? And if they're enemies of children, then they're going to be enemies of you regardless. If you want to live a decent life. Because those who don't respect children's virtue and life and innocence and so on will never respect yours, because if the thing about it is children are the future, they're vulnerable, they're weak and foolish, easily misled, and anyone that takes advantage of that against the impulse of people, normal people at least, to protect that smile, protect that innocence, protect that virtue, protect that life that we all, so many of us have in regards to children. If they're willing to do it to children, they're willing to do it to you. And really, you just got to find out who's willing to do it to children, because it's a slippery slope on the left, and the right has gradients, like step terraces, of different levels of intensity. But the left has a slippery slope where once you go down that path, for the most part, you're kind of stuck with it unless someone drags you out of it, and so on. And the people that go hard left naturally like that and continue to be hard left in the face of evidence that it's not a good plan, you can't reason with them, because it's like an addiction to predation on other people. It's like an addiction. An addiction doesn't register with logic. So destroying them is like the only thing you've got left, basically. And for that you need hatred of evil. And that's why when they preach tolerance, what they mean to say is, let the freaks be free and let the normal people be shackled. Because the freaks know they're freaks. That's why they spend so much time getting into power and infiltrating the high elite circles and saying you can't say that, that's reactionary or right wing or traditional or extreme or whatever. Sort of like the relevant phrase to this is, they want to take your guns away because they know you'll shoot them for what they intend to do afterwards. And it's like, just use common sense and logic in regards to dealing with potential predators of humanity within the ranks of humanity. And then everything else about civil society is basically, long story short, conflict adjudication between normal people, and protection of the vulnerable and innocent from pedophiles, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. The vast majority of those people will be responsible for the vast majority of the crimes committed against people on some level. Some of the predators, the dumb ones, are more opportunistic. They'll look around for someone who just happens to be vulnerable. And the elites will tend to try and create vulnerable people as a roundabout way to scoop the vulnerable for their predatory pleasures and so on. And that's why it's all tied together, because the predators that I'm talking about, the 10 to 20% of humanity that are evil inherently or neurologically or biologically, basically they all share the same goal and desire of power and lack of accountability. And I'm not talking about some role play accountability where it's like, oh, I said I'm sorry, or like I stepped down, but like my best friend who does exactly the same things but more so stepped up, and while he doesn't have quite the record because he's never been caught, he's worse in actuality. That's a trick they use. And then you are like, oh my god, I don't know what to do anymore. I guess I can't fight back at all. And it's like, no, no, no. The only reason why they do that is because people don't clue in on it. So get more aggressive, call it out more so, and, encourage others to do the same, and basically bring society back around to the point where it'll look out for its vulnerable members and so on. And maybe foreigners aren't members of our society in the first place, but those who are part of our society, i.e. not foreigners, we should care for. And I'm not even saying we shouldn't care for the rest of the world's societies on some level, but you'll notice that those who demand tolerance and acceptance and demand free money and free support from others for doing dumb crap tie into this predatory scheme, and are why taxation seems to be theft in the modern era, when before it was minimal taxation and it got a lot done for each dollar. In an efficient way, so there was actually an argument for it to be done, basically. Now, I know government's never really been strong on efficiency, but honestly, keeping it stronger than it otherwise would be in efficiency is important, because I do agree that some of these programs or departments or ministries or governmental things and services and programs and bureaucratic aspects are necessary. A very strict and hardcore code of conduct, or maybe not an official code of conduct because that's a little autistic, is important. That is simple to understand, basic, common, normal behavior, and I'll end with a quote, which is that a dying society breeds laws like flies on shit. as in it breeds laws really quickly. You don't need a lot of esoteric laws. You need a set of basic laws that are easily understood and rigorously enforced on real, actual crimes, not like staring at someone on the subway. You know, um, and I'll finish by going back to the point about the whole what your dad never taught you and what these cartoon characters are teaching about great wisdoms and so on is really you don't have to live in the gutter all the time. There is such a thing as getting like a good life. These people just can't actually offer it themselves, but they insist on staying in power. And that's why they're so aggressive towards sabotaging other people because they know that the other people can outperform them in the task of governance, good governance that ensures as many people get well off as possible. That's why they make up such extreme names like Nazi and fascist and right wing and extremist and so on for people that just want what is normal for most of human history. You don't need to be living under them. You can overthrow them just fine.